You can make a woman a literal ATM machine, and it's fine.
I'm so happy you could join us for another episode of Gender Pop. Please, take a seat. I have a roast in the oven and made your favorite pie for dessert. I'm here to serve, and all I want is to make you happy, dear. Oh God, even trying to act like that for a single second makes me want to yak. If you couldn't tell from my stellar voice acting, this episode we discuss the Stepford Wives, both the original from 1975 and the remake from 2004. Back for a third time is author and librarian James Wright, and boy, do we have a lots to say about this one. It's creepy, it's frustrating, and also depressingly prescient. Force your best smile, straighten out your apron, and let's visit Stepford Village. Guess who's back, 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 back again? James is back, yay!
Yay!
I
I
somehow
am
thought that
back.
would be less cringy than it was, but I'm gonna
No,
keep it in. Not gonna
all
edit
got
out the
cringe.
cringe.
It's fine. Cringe is good. Cringe is always good. Yeah,
But
especially when it comes to
yes.
these cringe is very prescient right now, isn't it? When you think about the topic to a point, the Stepford Wives, certainly the
Mm.
remake is a pile of cringe, a pile of something else as well, but you know,
It's
definitely
like this
cringe.
this this story just has different variations and levels of cringe, from the more successful type to the very much not successful type.
Yeah, you've got the original Stones Throw, and then the ripples are all terrible. All of the different sequels and iterations of this film are, at best, just like schlocky horror, and at worst, I don't know how. I'm gonna keep getting distracted by how bad the remake of Stepford Wives is, and how much I hate that film. Because that's obviously why I suggested it. Is because I was like, oh, do you know Stepford Wives is really good, and do you know the remake is awful? Let's do that. But upon our rewatch, I didn't realize it annoyed me so much more than I remember it annoying me. So, because I got annoyed by the ending. I remember when I first watched it because of how they changed everything, kind of like completely undercut the cool, like the good. Okay, I'm gonna go all over the place because I've got
Okay.
the passion of
I
the
just
annoyance.
I've been
Um,
holding on to a joke for a second, so I'm just gonna say Schlocky Horror is my favorite Tim Curry movie. Okay, I've said it. Now I can move on from it. Um, but yes.
oh,
Uh,
Schlock Treatment is the
oh, there
follow up
you
to that
go.
as well.
See? It's my
Hi
favorite
oh.
sequel to a Tim Curry movie. Um, but
See, that's a surprising
yes,
good.
I agree. We watched it together, and I agree. I was very surprised that it doesn't that it hasn't entered more of a cult favorite like Rocky Horror has. I mean, I don't expect it to be to the level of Rocky Horror, since that's like the most, I don't know, famous and successful like cult movie ever. But yeah, a lot of people are sleeping on Shock Treatment. Um, but that's
Yeah,
not the movie we're here to discuss.
I know. But again, an actual good, like actual satirical ahead of its time movie,
It's
unlike
true.
the Stepford Wives remake, which just everything is bad.
If you can't tell,
Okay,
this episode is going to be about the Stepford Wives. We're going to talk
yes.
about the original movie that came out in the 70s, and also a smattering, or maybe more of a smattering, depending on how annoyed we get, of the 2004 remake. So, before I unleash the James Beast onto this, just gonna go over the synopsis if people aren't aware of the story, even though it's become quite well known. So the IMDb synopsis is: Joanna Eberhart has come to the quaint little town of Stepford, Connecticut with her family, but soon discovers there lies a sinister truth in the all too perfect behavior of the female residents. It's based off of a novel by Ira Levin that came out just a year before the film. Um, the film came out in 1975. And what do you think of the original before we compare it to the questionable, which is being generous, remake?
Well, again, because I knew the two would be a contrast,
Hmm.
but watching them back to back, for
Hmm.
contrast is insane because the first Stepford Wives, I mean, the guy's novels like reflect this because he also wrote Rosemary's Baby, and that's got that kind of like creeping dread and like the idea of like everyone's against you and something terrible. There's a sense of inevitable ruin that comes from that film, and it's also present in the Stepford Wives. And I think I forgot about that. I remember the ending because it's such like a downer ending, and like I want to talk about that in a bit, but.
Hmm.
I remember that, but then you watch the whole thing, and even the moments of levity in the film are horrible because while the female characters are going about investigate. They're running. They're like doing. It's kind of. It's still lighthearted. It's still like a speculation of like, isn't this town silly? They'll cut to the men in the background, like looking through her clothes or like discussing. Like they're replacing her as. It's not like it's like an end thing they do because oh no, she's going too far. They were going to replace her from day one. That was good. She didn't do anything to deserve it. It was just going to happen. And there's like the sense of again the sense of like with Rosemary's Baby, where it's just like this thing's just going to happen to you. You have no choice in the matter. You didn't cross any moral boundaries to deserve it. It's just happening to you because people decided it, and that is a much better satirical point about gender issues than the Stepford Wives remake, which is completely like Nicole Kidman. She's like a boss bitch. She's too overworked. Oh, she deserves. It's like they actually make it so it's like she kind of deserves what's going to happen, which is really weird because it's completely opposite message. And I don't know who approved that. It's because it's from the early 2000s, and everything in the early 2000s is broken. That's what that is. Where we kind of got this idea that like, you know, oh look, we've given women the ability to talk about stuff, so now objectifying them is fine. It's even it's definitely fine. It's all equal, so we can also definitely just like make you into props, and it's funny. You can make a woman a literal ATM machine, and it's fine.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I agree with all the assessments that you just gave. I think the original film is so successful because, like you were saying, there's this kind of mounting inevitability about it, and I think again with a lot of Ira Levin's work because he did that. He did Death Trap, Rosemary's Baby. There's another one I'm forgetting, but it's very much seems like his stories and something that this movie aped very well or understood about the source material well is like this kind of loss of control and also it does fall into that genre of like conspiracies being proven right, like the like where the protagonist is framed as kind of being crazy and like losing their mind throughout it by it's like
Yeah,
being gaslit essentially by everyone that's around them and they're being saying that like they're the problem and they're having mental health issues or they're losing it only for obviously like the twist to be revealed that they were right to be fucking terrified all along and by then it's too late and it what's going to happen is going to happen and they can't do anything about it even though they try hard and like I think it's I think it's also helpful that like it seems like the original is so well and could have only been come out like in the 70s as well because that was a very
yeah, the slow
common
burn.
yeah like the conspiracy film like, I mean especially in the
Yeah,
70s like particularly political conspiracy films where you have like 3 Days of Condor, Parallax View, all but the President's Men and all this stuff um are all it's like it's very much like a snapshot of the anxieties like society was feeling, at least American society was feeling at the time, which kind of has come back around to feel very relevant. But it also plays into this film, I think, as well of just being a part of that genre. But it's nice, obviously, to see it from a happen from like a female perspective. Not that the story's nice to women, but it obviously is taking their side in the I don't want to say debate because it's not a debate. What they're doing is objectively horrible. But
well,
um
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, as I said, like they don't give you a reason why she's being converted. It's not like she's a terrible wife and so therefore
Hmm.
blah
Hmm.
blah blah. It's like well, no, there's just no.
Well, it's just what
He's
the
just
town does.
yeah,
It's
it's all
just
decided for her. Like well, let's talk about the beginning where they hard
yeah.
cut into her like moving. Like the initial scene where it's like a face jump scare where it's like a woman's face, no, because it's like she presses the bathroom mirror and it hits to her face. And it's like, oh no! And that initial scene is amazing in terms of, like telling you everything you need to know about the character. Where she's just there's no dialogue at all. She's just literally wistfully staring out of her apartment, her empty apartment window, as like sirens blare and horns like beep, and you can tell that she's just like she loves the city, but she's leaving, and the sadness on her face of that, and it's just like, okay, there's clearly someone who's not happy with what's going on. And then there's that bit where just after that, there's a guy walking with a mannequin, like a naked lady mannequin on the street, and he's taking her to somewhere, his home apparently, and her arm falls off, and he doesn't anyway. Like, and then she starts taking pictures of that, and it kind of like completely conveys one, what the story's going to be, because again, turned into a mannequin, the guys like all there, and then two, because she's taking pictures of it, it's kind of like, okay, so she's a photographer, she's interested in like anything weird
She
going
has good
on,
attention to detail.
and
She's
like
observant.
exactly. So like she's gonna be on this as soon as it has. So she is. It's like sometimes you ask, well, why are we following this person of the story? It's like, well, no. If someone was going to come to this town, that's turning women into like robots. She is the person who's going to be on that case. The only other thing you could do would be if you want to put it on the nose, it should be an investigative reporter, which is the main character in Revenge of the Stepford Wives. An investigative
Okay.
reporter comes to town and is like, "What's going on here in Stepford?" But that movie is it's not awful, but it is just horror schlock where like they keep trying to kill her constantly with the wives by like sending, and she's just like, oh, this is bad that someone's come after me with a knife. I'll just stay here, it's fine. And then the end is all cop out because instead of it being instead of being replaced by artificial beings or whatever, you're just drugged. They're all drugged. They're all like take a pill, and then so it's reversible. And I think that's the appeal of the original, in my opinion, is the sheer like horribleness of the fact that like no, these women, like, every woman you mate in the film is gone. They
Yep.
killed them and they raised them a robot. That's the
Yeah, they just
harshness of
don't
it. And if
exist.
you
They
take away
erase
the
their
harsh,
existence.
yes, exactly. Like, and again, the remake just completely fudges it by half of the time suggesting that they're robots and that they're trying to have like the gravitas of that while also then going like, but actually though it is just chips in the head, so they're fine, so we can reverse it at the end. You can't have your cake and eat it too, you can't be like, oh, it's really serious and terrible, but also it's all fine in the end, we're all fine, we're having an interview with Larry Flynn or whatever at the end, la 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 la.
Yeah, you're not the only one that was confused by that when I was doing research for this and stuff, and I was watching like a YouTube analysis. Someone did mention that 'cause they're like talking about the chips, and then they're like, "But you keep calling them robots," and like, why does she have fucking money coming out of her mouth then and stuff? So it's like, yeah, that there even and gender stuff aside, thematic stuff aside, like this is such a good contrast just between like good storytelling and not good storytelling. Like
Mm,
and like you say, like the beginning of the original, it's like I think it's such good writing and it's such a good example of,
yes.
like you said, how to convey everything you kind of need to right off the bat. And again, even without words a lot of the time, it's kudos to Catherine Ross's acting, who's plays Joanna, the main character, but also, again, just the filmmakers being so keyed into the story and what they want to convey that they know it so well that they know the beats to hit to telegraph everything we need to without like banging us over the head of it necessarily. But like that
Yeah.
mannequin part, also like the daughter leans over to her dad and says, "There's a man carrying a naked woman across the street," and he says,
Yeah.
"That's why we're moving to Stepford." And I was watching
Yeah. Like,
a
oh
bit of
no.
it. I was watching a bit of an interview with Brian Forbes, who is the director of the '70s one, and he was like, "Little do we know that that actually has like a kind of it's a double. It's like a not double entendre, but it has like double meaning in that like before you know the rest of the story, you go, oh, he's just commenting about like quote unquote how terrible the city life's become or whatever. He doesn't want to subject his
Yeah.
kids to
Yeah.
that."
Yeah.
But then later on, when you find out what they're doing
Of
to the
course not.
women, it's like that is a representation of them just what how their treatment of women, the fact that she's naked
Yeah.
is like that's part of all they want them for, and the way that he's just discarding her as well, or everything. So it's like I don't know if I it seems obvious in hindsight, but I didn't really click with me until I heard the director make that point. And I don't know, he kind of said it in a way that I don't know if he even kind of fully understood that, like in hindsight, how that could be read. But I think at least, again, from the start, this movie knows what it's about and how it wants to tell it the story that it's telling. Whereas
Yeah.
the remake is it is very messy. It's very all over the place. It has terrible pacing. Like it really needed several more drafts of that script before they filmed it. Like it comes across as like a first or second draft, and it really
Well, yeah. Yeah.
hurts it.
Just for sheer, I mean, again, we film these, uh, we record these podcasts kind of like presuming that people have at least have an idea of these movies,
Yeah.
if not, hopefully have seen them. But the reason, you can tell the Stepford Wives remake is so bad is because they clearly like try to do different scenes from the original, but do their own take on it, and every time it's worse. First of all, but also then they have to make space for that original. Sorry, to change the original ending. And okay, I've got lots of different things, but I'll try and do the end. I'll do it reverse. I'll do the ending bit now, which is that
Okay.
the reason I love the ending of the original is because I have firm belief, and I've talked to you about this before, where if you're going to make a moral message of a movie, the best way to do it is to either leave it unresolved or have a negative outcome because it motivates people to actually do something. If you fix it, if you say, "Oh, it's all fixed now," that's just like, well, we're saying this is a problem, but actually it's not because it's fixed. Whereas like something like Promising Young Woman, for that like spoilers for that, sorry, the fact that like she dies in the end of that, it's like that's motivating. That's like saying like these are problems that's still happening and this is not solved. She died, you deal with it. And that's the same step for Wives, where it's like, okay, this is a horrible thing that happened to this like innocent person, and this is the type of thing that like could happen if you let these men in power like just have their way. Because there's a bit, of course, there's a bit where the lead guy, for a guy who's a Disney Imagineer, which is amazing, by the way, just like the satirical thing of that in itself, like replace you with an
Diz.
animatronic, like it's a sword after all. Dun, dun, dun. But anyway, like yeah, Diz, he says like she's like, "Why are you doing this?" And he just goes like, "Because we can." And that's just such a great like end line near the very end of the thing before she gets replaced. Like just because we can, that's why. There's not like again the remake messes that up by giving all these different reasons of blah blah blah. Fine, whatever you want to do. There are certain satirical points of the remake that we can get to, but the idea that it's like no, this is an inherent thing that if you let certain men at least do, they will do to you, and you have to always be on guard and have to like don't because I think the reason it works is because it's all a metaphor for the lull of the suburbs. That kind of like, oh, you'll be better there. There's less crime. It's great, but it's like this kind of like, but you're also nothing there. You kind of like you cease to exist because you're just like. I mean, sorry, I'm not trying to diss suburban people, but like, you know, it is a place you go to stop. Like, especially if you're a housewife slash house husband, whatever you want to be. Like,
Settle, maybe.
that's it.
People
Yes,
see
you
it as
exactly. You're not some obviously that's not always true. There's lots of nuance to it. If you're a writer or a whatever, if you've got your own business, that doesn't have to be true. But there is a certain
right.
idea that if you go move to the suburbs, you do kind of stop contributing to like for wider society, whereas you might as well be a robot. But I think that's the point is I think that's what the film was getting at. And obviously at the time it was mostly women who would have been in that role. Like 99% probably at that point in the 70 like 1975. So yeah, the idea is to show that happening to this person who's been following the whole film and is compelling. And she's not unlikable at all. I mean, they don't try and do like a save the cat with her or anything, but she's a generally likable character, and Bobby's likable as well. And this horrible thing happens to both of them where they just stop being a person. And then you have the end of the remake where they do that ending. And then they're like, no, psych, actually, the husband didn't replace her. It's still Nicole Kidman. She's fine. And they bring everyone down and they restore all the women to how they, and it's all fine and everyone's great. And it's like, dude, you're undercutting your own point because the whole point is to get people angry and to do something about it. Oh, it just, no, no.
Well, I think because you got into like, the suburban hell of it all. I think especially for the original film, historical context is very, very important. And why I think the movie made kind of the splash that it did. I mean, to be honest, or to be clear, it was a box office failure when it came out.
Hmm.
And it had a lot of backlash, even from women themselves. A lot of people basically just did not get that this was satire or did not understand the tone of it and thought that it was like intentionally being like anti-woman or anti-family and all this stuff. But the historical
Interesting.
context is really important because, again, the film came out in 1975. So I just have like a few kind of facts to insert here. So, um, like before the 70s, leading up to the 70s, mostly like in the 50s and 60s, you had tranquilizers like Valium being massively
Mm.
overprescribed for women who are suffering from something they called suburban neurosis. This happened a lot like in Australia and the US as well. And so, like, some of the first people who developed pill addictions were housewives because they were suddenly in this reality where they were just trapped and empty and didn't feel like they had their own life. And so they would, like, obviously just doctors wouldn't take them seriously or their husbands wouldn't take them seriously. And they, again, it's one of those things like something's wrong with you. It's not society or the structure of how things are. You need to get your shit straight. Let's just throw a bunch of sedatives at you basically to numb you down. And so, like,
Mm.
you had a few decades of that happening. And then on August 26, 1970, 50,000 women marched down Fifth Avenue in New York City in a woman's strike. It was organized by
Mm.
feminist activist Betty Friedan, who is best known for writing The Feminine Mystique, which has become like a seminal feminist text. And a lot of the march was targeted towards the fact that women still perform the vast majority of domestic work. Like, and this kind of, I don't know if this started it, but it was a part of what we now know as the second wave of feminism, at least in the US. And a lot of, again, the focus was specifically about this kind of unpaid, undervalued domestic labor that women were forced to do, and how it was just going on and on like that, and that they were fucking fed up with it. And so, I think it's really important to know that this is the kind of culture this film was coming out in. So at the time, it probably felt very relevant. Unfortunately, it still feels like that, but like it was very much a part of the zeitgeist and the conversation that was going on. And that's why you get references of like women's lib and like them trying to form their own groups and um yeah, like the way that the women are trying to organize in the or some of the women in the movie are trying to organize and stuff. And so, and of course, like the pill was fairly new during that time as well. So that's like you had this really big resurgence of women's rights movement. And again, since it was about domestic work, that kind of lends itself directly into this film where the men are just trying to make them basically what we call now trad wife robots who are just exist to, do all of the domestic stuff. As we see in the remake, they kind of are used for more things, um, which is interesting. But I just kind of wanted to offer up the historical, yeah, culture of the time that this movie came out because I think it's really important in understanding the film itself. And also probably why there was backlash too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised there wasn't like more in some ways, but then I don't know. It's hard to put yourself exactly in that time, but you can see the points they're making about that kind of like, as you say, the housework, the fact that they have them. I don't know. Okay, yeah, sorry. There's both films from original remake kind of touch upon this idea of like technology and how that plays into stuff as well. And like there's that bit in the original where they do get the women's group together and they get all the like Stepford Wives in there. And the only thing they animatedly want to talk about is I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a detergent or something. So, yeah, I mean it's definitely a movie of the time and reflecting attitudes then and like I mean anytime you reflect some one opinion, there's gonna be a backlash or a high backlash as well, because obviously there's always gonna be a dissenting opinion. But I think the movie also is quite prophetic in certain things. Certainly, at least in terms of like terrible advertising, like when they're in for like for women's lib meeting that they organise for Stepford Wives, and they start the only thing they actually care about, they can't try to talk about like their careers or their wants, and they're like, oh, I don't care about that. When they talk about like all the house cleaning, the easy on like starch spray that they keep mentioning, where they're like, oh, and it becomes like the Truman Show later on when she's like advertising with coffee. It's the same kind
Yeah,
of
it's
thing where it's
very
like, oh, have you
product
had this?
placement-y, it
Yeah,
feels. Yeah.
yeah. And they do, I think they do that in the remake a little bit, but it's again, it's more on the nose as it's always going to be with her like actually advertising stuff or whatever. I think both, okay, to be fair to the remake in one thing, they both definitely reflect, not just kind of like, a fear of like patriarchal replacement of women and exploitation of women. They also both reflect a kind of like a fear of conservative values being taken to an extreme to where like people
Mm.
can't be themselves anymore. I mean, the 2004 remake is more about that, honestly, than I mean, it's got loads of really like ham-fisted gender stuff. But if we're going to talk about something that's like, you know, uh, post 9/11 Bush era America with all these like conservative things, that I was going to say kind of relates to today and how we feel today. Like, there's a lot of stuff you would watch that felt kind of like, oh, this feels like it would the trad wife stuff and whatnot feels like, oh, it could be a satire of now. So there are little things in the remake where I'm like, okay, I can see how that's prescient and like it's almost worse now than it was then. So there was some prediction. If the script wasn't so bloody sloppy,
Yeah, yeah.
basically, I think what happened there is the person who made it, wanted to do that critique of like that conservative culture and was like, oh, I'll use the Stepford Wives for that. So here's a bunch of gender stuff as well, but I kind of want to like, why is the guy in it, the gay guy in it, like running for office? Like, what is it? If it just comes out of nowhere, they're like, oh, political stuff now. Look, politics. It's like that's nothing to
Yeah.
do with any of the other stuff. Whatever. It's like there's a movie in there somewhere that has a point, but I think it confuses itself by also having, you know, again, but instead of like a satirical kind of like, oh look, they're almost advertising to each other this easy on product. And you could because when they do that women's lib meeting and they do that product placement, you can kind of see how if this went global, how it would work. Like you have all these robots, kind of like the businessmen could sell their products through their wives and stuff. And it's like really, it's a further manipulation, you know. Whereas in the remake, it's just like literally like, no, she's just an actual ATM machine, and all the smart house stuff doesn't make any sense, like because that never really comes up. And they got a robot dog for some reason, but there's not really. Okay, I'll talk about the remake for a second, where it's like the whole idea of that is that like for men there, it's not like as Diz says, oh we can. It's like oh it's like a what would you call it like lesser men? I don't know how you describe it. It's always it's a partners of people who are successful who want them to stop being
Yeah, it's
successful
basically
and
just
just be robots.
an association. Yeah, so the men's association in the remake is basically like their I mean, you could say that any man that wants to do this to their partner is insecure as fuck. But that the remake makes a point of the fact that Nicole Kidman's character finds out like all the women and Stepford used to be like these very high powered, ambitious positions, like CEOs and judges and all this stuff, and that their spouses couldn't handle that, so they brought them to Stepford to basically strip them of all identity and all power and make them into their little sex slaves.
Yeah,
And ATMs, apparently, again.
it's
So
it's
I
annoying to keep
think
bringing up, but it's just yeah.
Well, I think it's important when you're contrasting it to the original because I think it is very much like the original understood that less is more in the concept of like we don't really get to see what goes on behind closed doors of the men's association for the most part. We get little
Yes, yeah.
inklings, but we're not really because they're trying to play it somewhat close to the vest of like what they're doing and trying to beef up the kind of intrigue and mystery that's at the center of what's going on,
Mm.
and um,
Yeah, like
so
it's bad, but how bad is it?
right, and again, like it really tries to only mostly do it through the perspective of Joanna, and obviously she is not privy to these meetings. She has to piece things together, give context
Mm.
clues, and honestly just has to go off of vibes and her own like intuition that something deeply fucked up is going on. Um, and the remake just shows us like way too much, gives us way too much. And it's like it's one of those things like how could it ever kind of be satisfying in a
Mm.
way? And also it's like again hitting people over the head with it. Like I think you can And that's probably why the original didn't feel the need to go into it. Again, maybe it goes into it a lot more in the book. I haven't read the book, but maybe like they have whole chapters devoted to like these men's association meetings. I don't know. But
Hmm.
what the remake didn't
I'm at.
understand is kind of dripping out the storyline like the original does, and it didn't understand how to maintain that kind of tension that the original
Yeah.
does, and they give us way too much that we don't need.
Well, also it's like you're almost humanizing those characters when you see them all goofing off and stuff, and like I just hate how goofy the whole thing is. It's not like it's just from such a serious like. Well, yeah, I mean, but again, as I said, like the moments of levity in the original always are undercut by the fact that like there's always shady stuff coming
There's always
in the
that ulterior
background.
motive underneath it. Like you go, oh, this guy is just being like a nerd about his hobby, but it's all within the aim of trying to get to know as much about Joanna as possible in order to make her fake robot
Well,
version or whatever, you know?
well, yeah, I mean, we talk about like gaslighting. Like this, the original Stepwise is the most gaslighting movie since the movie Gaslighting came out.
Yeah.
Um, it's just legitimately like every because the guy's sketching her face in that meeting, and then like she talks to him, it's like, oh
Ugh.
look, because I'm famous, it's fine, even though that's like literally how they're gonna replace her.
I'm
Um,
sorry. Can we talk about like one of the creepiest fucking lines in a film I've ever heard where Diz, that guy, kind of the leader of the men,
oh
sees her
yeah,
like doing dishes and it's like and you can tell again this is how you knew the filmmakers kind of were on the women's side like the way they film it is really creepy too where you just see him like part of his body come into frame and you they film it like you can tell he's just leering at her
yeah,
without her knowing at first and then he just says she's doing dishes and he just says, I love seeing women do little domestic chores. And like you
yep,
can tell in her face that she's like, what the fuck? Like, um, but that's so creepy. And again, in the remake or in a lesser film, that could just come off as like silly and goofy. But here it's like, like no, like get like I just was like, run, girl, run. Like it's just
yeah. I mean,
it's
that
such a
whole scene is
successful little nugget of creepiness that they inserted in there. Like, yeah, kudos to that
yeah,
guy for delivering it well too.
it's a very intense scene in its own way, and the fact that I can't remember exactly what she says to him, but like when she's got the tray of tea, and she hands him the tray, which is already her going like, screw you, and then she says like, you're not very like, oh, it's okay, you have a
Yes,
face that makes it look like you don't like making people happy, is what she said, which can be a critique of like him, as a supposed Disney. She doesn't believe he's a Disney engineer, and then also
yeah,
like it could be like a sexual critique as well, like you don't look like you make someone happy, boosh. But either way, she's giving it back. She's giving it back straight away. She's
yes,
not the type of person to get pushed around or like leered on. She's not. She doesn't freak out. She doesn't do nothing. She just says like, "You're a dickhead, mate," and like leaves. And that's
yeah.
just like again a really great like comeuppance to that whole weird. Although I will say she also gives it back to the guy who's sketching her because he's like a famous
Hmm.
artist or whatever. And she
Yeah,
goes like, "You blight." She says the exact line, "You blighted my adolescence,"
yep.
as in
What
like
a
because
weird
he
line, but yeah.
well, because he draws all these like sexy women, and obviously as a kid she's looked at them and like it made her feel like
Yep.
shit. So even though she's
Hmm.
like cordial with him, she is like, "You fucked me up, mate."
And you
Like,
still don't even understand because, like, obviously he kind of quips it back in a flirty way, not like, because he's probably proud of the fact that's what the effect his work has had. He doesn't care, obviously.
I mean, that's what's scary about this movie is it. When I watched a few bits, it felt like we almost are moving backwards now, where it's like there's that, which is like this film is critiquing the women's portrayals in magazines that make younger women feel bad, but then also like there's a line from before that Bobby says where she's like, oh yeah, he's annoyed that like yeah. But like, oh, what do you do in those men's association meeting? And he's like, oh, they probably just like watch porn and talk about the good old days when Playboy used airbrush. And it's like, so the idea is that like it's getting more natural, like women's bodies are becoming more like actual, like what they represent, and like men hate that. Let's crush that. And it's like obviously now you see all the social media stuff, which is much worse than it used to be. You talk about airbrush, you talk about like editors, you talk about AI now. It's like moving women further and further to this artificial, like not even real at this point, AI girlfriend. So to point, it's sad because it's like, oh no, we had this turning point possibly, and instead of turning, we did kind of we went into the dystopian future is what we did eventually. And it's like, oh no.
Well,
Well,
I
especially
liked.
actually, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, like I was saying, like we're doing that now. Think about the '80s and like the hairspray and the airbrushing, and the shoulder pads and all that. Like, let's to be a woman, you have to be this like insane, crazy. It's not nat. If we were to say this was talking about the '70s body as being a natural female body, like the '80s, it's like aerobics and like bust up your shoulders and big hair and really neon makeup. It's like it's sort of like the idea of power, but it's like it's a projection of power. The only way you can be a woman is to project power, and it's very masculine, and that's almost backwards because it should be like being a woman is like you can just be a woman and that's fine. You don't need to project anything. You're strong enough on your own, and like airbrushing and all that stuff is bullshit. And then it's sad that the '80s went the other way, and that we're still going the other way.
Well, it's
Right.
2 points off of what everything you just said, and I'll start with because you mentioned the '80s, and one of the kind of analysis that I was reading brought up like the '80s again, like in a historical context. So, um, in the remake, Glenn Close is in the remake,
Mm-hmm.
and it's spoilers. It's revealed that she's kind of like the mastermind behind it all, and she's plays basically an antagonist and villain character by the end of it. And analysis I was watching brought up the fact that they feel like this was, given the content of the movie, that this was almost like a pointed type of casting because of her role in Fatal Attraction and how that was kind of observed and perceived at the time. And it all kind of connects back even for the 70s film because like since there was that huge wave of feminism throughout the 70s, the 80s had a backlash to that and kind of what we're seeing now kind of regressed in their views and portrayals of women and everything. And a big point of one of those portrayals was her character in Fatal Attraction, and the history behind that making of that film was laden with sexism itself, where if people don't know, originally like Michael Douglas's character was supposed to be the made an example of and like no, this is like the bad guy. He took advantage of this woman. He's the one fucking up his life and his marriage and his relationship with his kid and all this stuff by straying and cheating and all this stuff, whatever. But Michael Douglas didn't wasn't happy with that. He's like, I'm not gonna play. Yeah, it's really messed up, really really messed up. But he was not okay with that, with being the kind of quote unquote bad guy or being perceived as weak. And so they just made Glenn Close's character like worse and worse each draft till she became this kind of archetypal, hysterical, crazy woman that's just gonna come in your life, like fuck you real good, and then like put a dead bunny in your stove. Like and I know Glenn Close has talked about how much she fought to not have that be the final kind of portrayal of her character. Because, I mean, she had a lot of empathy for her character, and obviously, I have to imagine when she signed on to play that role, it wasn't originally that they've changed the
Yeah.
ending and all this stuff. So it's like I know that she tried really hard to make the character just more dimensional and not just be this like psychotic other woman kind of thing that ended up being. But it's like you think of, I don't know, if you're like kind of a film nerd like I am, it's interesting to connect those pieces. And I didn't make that connection, and it might be a tenuous connection, but I do think it was an interesting point when you think about like what the 70s film is trying to say, and then the backlash that that kind of thing had to then when the remake came out, and how the casting can kind of tie those eras together and the opinions on feminism throughout the decades as well.
Well, yeah,
Um,
because I mean that's the main reason I kind of dislike the remake is because you take all the points and you undercut it by making a
yeah,
like a woman the antagonist in the end. So it's like, well, it's not even the men that are doing it really. It's just one woman. And also that is a great point because it's obviously that's like it's unfortunate that happened in the film because that's what coined
yeah,
the term bunny boiler, which is a thing
yeah,
people use to actually put people down. And then it's like Glenn Close in the remake is a bunny boiler taken to the
yeah.
extreme, which is like
I
I'm
feel
gonna
bad for
take
her, man.
all of you. Well,
I mean, she
just
signed
yeah,
on, she did it.
yeah,
She's like, obviously it didn't bother her enough or whatever, but um I do know that she did have a hard time with Fatal Attraction at least. And I I don't think the kind of cultural impact that film had was the one that was originally intended, and I also don't think
yeah,
it's one that at least at the time. I mean, it's been long enough. Maybe she's just kind of embraced it or accepted it at now, but like, and like she's great in the film. She got a fucking Oscar
mm,
nom for it. It kind of was like her big breakthrough and all that stuff. But um, like you say, it is unfortunate that like it seems like the wrong message was taken from that, and a lot of that stemmed from the production itself of, quite frankly, a lot of the men involved not willing to portray the man in that movie as being in the wrong as well, you know?
mm,
And that also traces back to the remake where, as you pointed out earlier, it weirdly villainizes the women in the movie as almost like they deserved it, or it's like a
mm,
comeuppance, or they just weren't trying hard enough to be good spouses and all that stuff beforehand. And again, I wouldn't assume that's the intention. I think it's important to also mention that both of these films were helmed by men, directed
mm,
by, written by, uh, and it's very fascinating to see the different approaches each had, where I kind of like that the original is good because it shows that some men can get it and are empathetic to what women have gone through. And I know that when the original film received backlash, the things that people were critiquing about it, I know particularly the actor that played Walter, the husband, um, he came out and clapped back and was like, all the points you're making is exactly what we're like making fun of and trying to make an example of. Like, so the second point that I had was something that you pointed out was Joanna's honesty in the original. We are shown that she's a very honest person, and I think it's telling that like the only person that kind of at least verbally appreciates that is her friend Bobby, who in the film when we meet her is the only other wife that hasn't been killed and roboticized. And so obviously they get along very well. And I think I like her honesty as well too, but I think it's again also telling that it seems like the characteristics of the women that they demonize are honesty and being outspoken,
mm.
and that just like it's so pronounced obviously in the way that you see how Joanna and Bobby act versus the other wives, and it's not surprising that that would be. And another big point is the dumbing them down, and that part really, again, it's an obvious thing that would happen in this process of stripping women of their autonomy, but that just really pissed me off because
Mm.
I get really upset at the notion of trying to uneducate women. And this is mostly demonstrated through the fact that like Bobby understood the definition of a word earlier in the film and then later on doesn't, and that's
Archaic, yeah.
yes, that's one of the things that tips Joanna over into her realizing that it's not her friend anymore. She's not there, and that they kind of seem obviously to make it a point that these robots are dumb motherfuckers, and that's very much a part of the point of it, of stripping
Yeah.
women of any intelligence and any awareness. And I just think
That,
there is made a point of the certain characteristics that these men demonize in the women that they're trying to change.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's. So I was going. Blah, 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 blah. I was going like because there were like the two other women in it who aren't Bobby. The one with the tennis court. I can't remember the
Right,
name
right.
of, but like, and then the old lady who runs the net paper because she's not roboticized, and she says to them like,
Yeah.
"Well, yeah, Stepford used to be. I mean, she's weird, but she's not a lady. What do you want?" But she's like, Stepford used to have the
Yeah.
first women's club. Like, it used to be the most progressive place. And when she says it, they're like, "Yeah, sure." But it's like, oh no, it actually was, and like it gives a great example as to why Stepford became what it became. Because it's like, oh
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
this was a place where women could speak out, and the men saw that and were like, no,
Yep.
we're going to put a stop to that. So it's it gives the whole story a motivation for why it even happened in the first place. So it's like, oh yeah, women were getting to like
Well, it's a classic
independent
thing
and
of for people who are used to having it all, any equality feels like oppression to them. So
Mm,
it's like they saw the women in town were trying to gain more equality and they took that as an affront and were like, nope, we're just going to use all of this. It's such a great example of what the film does well. Again, of not spoon feeding things, but drip feeding things throughout the film to kind of piece together. So you have the mention that there used to be like a women's lib chapter there. And then you get the little snippets of there being different, basically like technological and scientific data centers or offices kind of around. So you can
mm.
see that that's we're kind of just meant to understand that that's how they're able to make these robots is that they've made Stepford this kind of technological corridor specifically
Yeah.
probably to make these robots happen. And yeah,
I
that's
suppose
it's
that's
so devastating to hear that line about there having been a women's movement there because like you said, it's so that's all you need to know to kind of understand the motivations at the end of the day, and it's like, oh, it's just frustrating.
I suppose that's an interesting inversion between the original remake because in the remake, as we discussed, it's like it's these like mediocre men who can't stand their like high flying women being high flying and to bring them down, which is something that happens as you say with the intelligence being dimmed in the original. But in that, it's like it's these high flying men who've decided to hold their women down. So it's slightly more progressive to make it for women because if you have you've got like a Disney Imagineer, you've got like a famous sketch artist, you've got all these I say with technology people like it's like these famous men who are good at their stuff have come along and like oppressed women. Whereas, yeah, in the remake, although they undercut that because then Glenn Close is like a research is like a famous research person. Well, I suppose that still gives it, but she's one who it's like, oh, you see, if a woman gets too successful, she'll just bring all the other women down as well. I mean, and then to be fair, she did reveal that she was going to turn all the husbands into robots at the end of it. If
She
once she got
was
away,
that was
she's going
frustrating
to turn
because
everyone into
like
robots.
I don't they didn't do it well, but I feel like there is maybe a version of this where it is
Yeah.
interesting to have a woman being the one behind this because internal
Yes.
misogyny is real. It
Mm.
happens. It's always happened. It'll probably continue to happen, sadly. And so like, but
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
like
oh no, just as you're saying it, you sparked the thing in my head of like it would work if Matthew Broderick didn't help Nicole Kidman. If he was
mm,
like taken in by all these men and like became like, one of these like what do they call like manosphere bros or whatever. Now you could do it now. Basically, you could do it now where he got taken in by all this manosphere crap. But then you find out it's actually a woman who's in charge of all that. She's the one feeding all these men propaganda. Then you've got a point where it's like, look, you're all idiots. You're all just like buying into this stuff about you being dominant, but you're not even. It's not even a man behind it. It's a bloody woman behind it who's like, taking charge of all it for herself. Like you're so
I just
stupid and
have
corruptible.
real beef with like the twist being like, oh, it's a woman in movies and stuff. Like you have like a serial
Yes,
killer
yeah,
on the loose and it's like da da da, it's a woman. And it's like, why is it still like a shocking thing to include in your stuff or whatever? So it's like, I don't know, I'm of two minds about it where and because this movie just doesn't do it well, but it would be again, I'm not opposed to exploring the internal sides, but again, like it's not even because, like you say, since she said she was going to do it to other people, like the men, and she did do it to her husband.
mm.
And then
That's
she
how it
has
started.
that
Yeah,
line of like, I just wanted a place where like men could be men and women could be women. Like she's very much that there is sexist agenda with wrapped up within that, but she seems very much just like again in that kind of conservative ideal of like what a perfect relationship looks like a nuclear family going back to the quote unquote good old days, where like the lines about gender were clear or whatever.
yeah,
You can get away with doing a lot of stuff if you're talented at it, if you're skilled at the story you're kind of telling and understand the story that if you have a clear vision for what you want that to be. So it's not like it's sad to me that there was kind of a regression in the storytelling because I think where the original felt courageous and brave to an extent, the remake kind of chickened out because they were trying to make it much more of this kind of comedic,
yeah.
more mass
It's almost
mass
like a family
appeal, big
comedy.
budget thing. Yeah, and like
Yeah,
I don't know how true this is, but when I was doing my research, it came up that like the original film was like one of the very first movies, at least, to tackle feminism as like its main theme at all. Like there just weren't
Hmm.
stories that were not necessarily just about women, but about like the sexism that we face and making it that be a very apparent message that they're trying to get across here. And so like at the time, I could see that it was sort of revolutionary. I think that's why it's gone back to have a respected and more positive regard these days because I think people can see what it was trying to do versus again, it was really on the pulse when it was coming out, and I don't know if people were really receptive to confronting that. Um, Again, we go back to Michael Douglas in the 80s saying feminists have gone too far, so it's like there were
Uh,
people trying to undo everything that was kind of happening in the 70s. And so I think this film and this coming out in the 70s was quite um there was some courageousness about it and willing
hmm.
to go there and willing to not have the happy ending and all that stuff. And then you see the remake and they weren't willing to do that at all. I think in order to make the story work, you have to let it be dark. You have to let it be uncomfortable and not sanitize elements of it or not make jokes of it. Not that like you can't have dark humor, of course, but I think the original has a lot of reverence and respect for the story that it's trying to tell and understanding that it's a serious subject matter. And
Yeah,
if
I
you're
mean,
just
I think
undercutting it with goofs and gags, you're doing a disservice to the message it's trying to convey.
I think I mean I'm a big proponent of like writing and like the books, obviously, and the like the source behind and the thought behind those writings. And I think you can definitely tell when a film is based on a book, but it's got all this source material to draw off of and can shape it, and when a film's just kind of like thrown together where they're like aping the original. Especially when you compare the two, I think a good point is to compare the two Bobby scenes, where it's like we talk about like not being funny, but the original Bobby scene is both funny and chilling as well. When she
Disturbing.
comes,
Yeah.
yeah, when she comes into the kitchen, she's like not herself, but she's still sassy. She's still got this like Bobby personality. It's just roboticized, and I like that too. Because it's not like Glenn. Is it Glenn Close? I'm bad at the
Bette
names.
Midler.
Bette Midler, very bad names.
That's fine.
But when Bette Midler like transforms entirely from who she was to like this like perfect
Just to
housewife,
interject, Bette Midler plays Bobby in the remake, so people have a little
yes,
clarity. That's
yeah,
all. Good.
and in that she's a big stereotype as well because it's like, oh, the only woman in town who has an opinion has to be like, can't be like one of these. I think that's another thing about the remake. I was going to say a story about Glenn Close is that like, you know, you can almost tell she's the bad guy from the start because she's not like young and like vivacious like the other ones. She's like the older one. Why is she a Stepford wife? It doesn't make any sense. And, oh, well, she's actually not. And then Bobby, obviously, again, they have to completely transfer to get Bobby to get Bette Midler into the state that they want. They have to completely transform her. They have to like I don't know how they did the course and whatever they did, but they like didn't. She wasn't like slightly different like for Bobby original was because the Bobby original was basically the exact same, looks nearly exactly the same, but whatever. The point is, where he's like they try to villainize women's bodies in the remake by having them there but making them wrong, if that makes sense. Whereas like the original
Yeah,
is more just
because
like
because Bette Midler's she's frumpy, she's sloppy, she's a people among the sea of women she's around, she wouldn't be considered attractive. And also, I think it's very important to include the fact that she's Jewish, and they make a point of her being Jewish,
a
and
lot.
yes, it's very like I was surprised at the kind of undercurrent of anti-Semitism there, where it's like it's used as a point of difference, like this makes her different than the other people, and they kind of like when she's transformed, whatever, she's like de-Jewishified in a sense too. Like
Yeah,
they've
they
gotten, like again, it's stripping people of their identity, of their culture, but and it, again, in a film that was better, that could be a solid point to make about like another reason that's fucked up of what they're doing is
hmm,
that they're not only targeting gender, but they're targeting people's like cultural history or ethnic history or whatever. And again, it starts playing into this very uncomfortable Aryan race kind of stuff where you're very
hmm.
blonde, very white, prim proper type of stuff. And it's just a noticeable difference between like the original, which I think is, well, you have that little bit about race in that. Like it is because in the original they make quick mention that there's the first black family in Stepford is moving in, and then you see them very
Yeah.
briefly at the end,
Yes.
and you
Yeah.
obviously the wife hasn't been transformed, quote unquote, yet, and it's just very interesting how they would approach that. Is it strictly about gender only, or are they going to
Well.
also strip her of the fact that she comes from a different background and has a different lived
Mm.
experience, and I'm not going to go into it too much as a white person. I'm not going to speak on that, but there, yeah, but the remake I think delves into a little bit of a weirder territory
Yeah,
with
definitely.
all of
Because
that
like,
that I don't think works.
yeah, because in the original, I kind of took that to mean that like the men don't care about race; they just want to eliminate women, so they're quite happy. Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're black, but you can come in. We're going to replace her definitely.
Right, right.
Which just
Yeah.
just hits home the point of like it's just anti-woman in that film. Whereas yeah, the remake is just muddled because as you say, it's kind of like it's sort of about, as I said, it's kind of more about conservatism than it is about gender. And it's almost like they just like hijacked the story just to tell this thing about like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if everything was conservative, or like, or boo everything, yeah.
Well, I think
Well, it's
it's
hard
telling
because
that, like, in that last shot, when we do see the brief glimpse of the black couple, they're like arguing, it seems like,
hmm,
and you just go, "Oh, they're not gonna." Again, it's such uh, a testimony to their storytelling up until that point where they do these kind of just drops of build up for you to understand the world you're living in, and you go, oh no, this woman's arguing with her husband. They're not gonna stand that for long. They're not gonna allow her to be like that for long. Like just the
well,
it's just you feel so
yeah.
bad for her knowing that she doesn't have long for this world because how dare she have an
Well,
opinion and you know.
again, I feel like with Stepford, it's like it's not like you go in the original. Certainly, it's not like you go there and then your actions dictate whether you're replaced. It's like you're going there because you're gonna get replaced. Like the guy's already made up his mind. But as
Okay.
she says in the original, she's like, you made the decision to move here. You didn't. You asked me. I said no, and you did it anyway. And like you decided this, you decided that, and it's like it's this idea that like you just men are taking away your choice.
That
So
was so
like she's
frustrating.
already well, yeah, that's my point. The film is supposed to make you angry. That's the exact point of the original, is to make you angry and to make you active and do stuff. That's why the remake is so insidious, because it takes that anger and makes it into a joke and makes it like, lol, isn't it funny? And like, oh, haven't we solved all these issues? Aren't
It
conservatives silly?
it
Like, who cares?
trivializes and demeans feminism in some ways and our
Yeah,
and like legitimate concerns. But it's like, yeah, just right off the bat, like at least I was frustrated for Joanna because she got roped into doing this thing that she didn't want to. And like, of course, she could have said something, but it's like they didn't even seem like well, like you say, she makes a point. She's like, you had already put a down payment on the house. You had
hmm,
already, like he did all this stuff before even coming to her about the idea of moving. Like it was gonna happen whether she had a say in it or not because he went ahead and did all the major decision making. And that's I find the character of Walter, again, her husband, very fascinating because
hmm,
I would think at the start of the film he would think they have a pretty decent and equal partnership because he allows her to have her opinions and talk and speak up and blah 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 or whatever, but and allows her to dabble in her photography hobby and everything. But it's just like they're having that conversation when they've already moved, and I'm like, this is fucking too late to be having this conversation. This
yeah,
should have been happening from day one. And like again, it just speaks to the prevalence of the fact that women are just expected to give up their lives
hmm,
for men at the drop of a hat, or we're always the ones that ask to make like the biggest sacrifices for male partners or whatever. It just reinforces the fact that we're just seen as like second class, not even humans sometimes. Obviously, they make them
yeah,
into non-humans in a way and stuff. And like, so it's already starting off on like a bad foot in their marriage. And I don't know if she would even classify their marriage as having been bad, unlike they do in the remake, where they very much say like our marriage is having issues or whatever. But
hmm.
um, I'm interested in what your opinion on Walter is. Do you think that he already knew this was happening in Stepford? If not, when do you think it is? And
I
do you think he
I
ever?
very much.
Okay. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
I was
I
just gonna
just
say,
I
do you
very
think he
yeah.
ever struggled with the decision to do that to his wife?
It's a yes to everything you just said. Because
Okay,
again, I'm rewatching it. That like it's like one of the early scenes where he's like pissed, and he's just like, sorry, like in English pissed, so drunk.
right.
Um, he's drunk, and I think he's drunk in that thing. He like goes because he knows what's going to happen. He's made this decision. He's like, I'm going to replace her for whatever reason he had motivation for it. Um, I don't know if it's just because it's like, oh, you're sick of her or whatever, but you still love
Or that
her.
he
But
gets talked into it and convinced. I mean,
yeah,
like, I think you already have to be in a certain mindset to even be open because like obviously I would hope most people, men or women, would be presented with that their pitch and be like, fuck no, I'm out of here. But again, we don't know what goes on there. They could threaten him too, for all we know. Like what, I'm not trying to like side with him. It's because the film is very much taking the stance that like, no, these men are making this conscious decision. We were talking about Walter, and like you do see him kind of descending into alcoholism basically as the film goes on, which I did take as him starting to really struggle with this decision to do this to Joanna.
yeah. I still think he maybe okay, maybe he didn't know what was happening at the very beginning. I'm trying to remember that very beginning bit because when she sees a bloke in the middle of the day come home and like fondle his wife, and it's like very weird. It's like I like see that's again the original is great because it's like you frame this thing and it's like it's compared to a remake where it's bad comedy that undercuts things. This stuff always is like comedy, but it's also creepy. Where it's like that's really funny to see that, but it's also really fucking
It's
creepy that he just
everything
walks
in
up to his
hindsight. When you look back knowing what's actually going on, it's fucking disturbing and like
yeah.
and it's like originally framed as her kind of accidentally walking into this kind of she sees as like this sweetly romantic or saucy
Well,
moment. I mean, she doesn't look at it. I don't recall her having an
no,
expression
maybe
being
yeah.
like, I mean, because she doesn't know what's going on. She just thinks it's kind of like a husband and wife getting a little frisky, when they
So
don't think they're.
although when Walter then does the same because he's like, "I'll just grab your boo," she's like, "Well, get out of it."
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not
but I
saying she's
think
a
they're
prude. I'm
happening in
saying that
different
like it's
contexts.
yeah. Well, I mean, she is just gardening him, and he just walks up to her and just grabs her. Look, it's the way he grabs her from behind, opens
Yeah,
her top, and just looks at him, and then goes like, "Yeah,
yeah,
get
yeah.
in the ass." Um,
Yeah, but I think it's so with the understanding of like, well, this is a couple, and you assume that this is consensual from afar when you're not a part of because this is when she was still very new to the area. She didn't really know these people, and obviously, so it's like, I mean, it's similar to
I,
the scene we see later on when they hear two people having sex and they're just laughing about it because they don't see anything kind of. They think it's a little ridiculous and over the top, but they're
I
also
love
just
that.
kind of
I love
like
that scene.
well, good
I
for
love
them or
that.
whatever. And so it's like, um, again, from a very outsider perspective, I mean, I would if I saw that, it's not something I would just be like, okay, this is just must be what these two people do, and that's just how they are in this relationship, and good for them, I guess. Like
But it seems like that makes you say like it's at least got some comedic beats where it's like because that is
yeah, yeah,
the fact
yeah.
that she's
It's
like
weird.
was it's like you're the best, you're the king,
Ugh.
you're the master, and then obviously because you're the master, it evolves into like the
Yeah,
slave
yeah,
dynamic and like so it's
yeah.
still being satirical while it's making jokes. That's how like with, again going back to the Bobby scene when she gets stabbed and it's like, oh god, she's a robot, and she's like, I thought we were friends. How could you do that? It just goes on a little loop of like throwing the stuff everywhere, but like not, it's not crazy. It's very like
Yeah.
subdued where she's like casually making coffee, but like dropping the cups and stuff, and it's like then yeah, compared to the remake where she burns her hand, but it's not even, oh, just whatever. That whole remake thing, it just and they do the remake of that scene, and then they do the remote thing where she's wandering up and down the stairs. They take subtle comedy scenes in a dark movie and make it into ridiculous slapstick, but not funny slapstick, bad slapstick. And it's the biggest crime in the history of cinema, that type of thing. God damn it. Anyway, sorry. Back to Walter about whole
Mhm.
thing. I do think that there's oh that's another thing, like in that scene when she sees him, one of the things that commented on it was like, why is he home in the daytime? And it's because like men are at work in the daytime. Why would he be home? Because she was like, I think at least I think it was her husband. It was for daytime kind of thing, and it's like, oh, because that's what I thought. I thought they might reveal that it wasn't her husband, like it's some guy who just like it's like, well, I can fuck this robot. I don't know what you want. Which it could have been. They don't actually really disclose whether it was him. I don't think at any point. So it could have. I thought it might have been Diz or something, like because he's the only single person in town, which is like single man, suspicious. Which
You
is
mean when they
there's
walk
always
in
little
on
things.
people having sex upstairs?
No, 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 from the
Oh,
the
okay, okay.
garden because it's in the middle of the
Oh, yeah,
day.
yeah.
Well, so that's in the middle of the day as well, which also doesn't make sense. Basically, the men should be at work and they're not, which is also suspect in its own way. God damn it! But yeah, the whole town is like set up in a certain way. Maybe he didn't know when moving there exactly what it was, but there's definitely some kind of thing. It's like I took a real note, although it didn't really pan out later of the shop boy when the two women crash into each other at the supermarket. The shop boy's like panicked. He's like, it wasn't my fault. I didn't see him coming. Like it's like he knows the stakes. Like even though he's not, he's not a husband or whatever. He's just
Well,
like
they're
some
the ones
kid.
having the affair, right? That guy and the other woman. And that's what they were kind of giggling about.
Were they having an affair? I thought
The
that was his wife.
when they walk in on people having sex, it's people having an affair, I think.
Oh, I
And
didn't think it was. I thought it was a pharmacist and his wife. But because then
oh,
they
maybe
talk
not.
about.
Maybe you're right then. Maybe I misinterpreted that or something
I
then.
I thought the scandal of that was how hot she was and how he was an old man. Because they were like, look at her and look at him.
Okay. Okay, yeah, maybe
I
that's the point that
think,
Bobby was making to Joanna when they were kind of leaving the shop. I mean, she was like, "That's who we heard," kind of a thing, you know.
yeah.
Okay,
Well,
yeah, you're
that's what
right.
I
That's
thought
probably
that
what
was
it
the
is.
point of like, yeah, he's this nerdy guy, and like, how is he the king of the master? Like, we heard her because
Right,
it's
right,
like
right.
because when you hear a woman in the throes of that much pleasure, you would possibly not presume it was like a nerd little pharmacist
Yeah, you're
shopkeeper.
right.
Yeah, yeah, who knows? But that I thought that was a joke.
No, I
It's
think
hard
you're
to tell, isn't
right.
it? But like, no, I'm talking about the scene near the beginning where like say the two cars collide and it like makes the one Stepford wife
Oh,
like malfunction, and that's when you have the whole like, oh, the
yeah.
hospital's that way, but we're taking her that way. But before
Yeah.
that, the shop guy who's like the boy child man who's like, oh, come out, and like they hit each other. He's so panicked if you hear him in the background. He's like, oh no, that wasn't my fault. I didn't see she came out, but and it's like he knows that he's in trouble. And it goes beyond that level of like, oh no, it goes to like I think he knows the whole town. I don't know. I just think the whole town is kind of like structured in a kind of way where it's an open secret what's going on.
Yeah. At least maybe
I
with the
think.
men.
Yes, well, yeah, oh yeah, of course, yeah. No, obviously, you are not going to tell people you actually get replaced. Like, hey, by
Well,
the way,
it's
um,
again one of the many instances of like if you look back on it in hindsight, you could interpret it a different way with knowing what you
hmm,
know now. And he could be because like I mean on surface level, I think he just doesn't want to be liable for what happened and he doesn't want to get the grocery
sure.
store in trouble for what happened and stuff because people can be quite litigious around
Well,
those.
that's a weird. It's weird too that like sorry like that the grocery store owner comes out and he's touting how quick the ambulance gets there. He's like only in
Yeah.
Stepford, and it's
Well,
I don't
again,
know the
it's the
whole
whole
thing.
like big bad city versus perfect
Yes,
suburban whatever. But yeah, I also made note of the fact that in one of the very first scenes, like when they're just moving into their house in Stepford, the husband has a shirt on that says Papa Power.
um,
And I was like, it's obviously telegraphing the kind of power corruption that's going on here, but is also just weird and silly and I thought just a nice little detail to kind of
well, yeah,
have earlier on in the film about what kind of where the story was going to be going.
that kind of reminds me of like at the beginning where the first step for wife knocks on the door with the like pot roast or whatever, and she's like talking to Walter, and it's like played as like romantic almost, like oh, she's a homemaker, but she's also a home wrecker. Whoa, 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 whoa,
Well, it's also
like
just like the use of the voice. Like obviously they make them very soft spoken and
yeah,
oh, you got to placate all the men with sounding just like a lost little doe in the woods or like a freaking baby and stuff. And I think he in that moment is having a kind of probably subconscious reaction to kind of how nice, quote unquote, it is for a woman to be presenting herself that way, and
we
in the contrast to the who he's married to and maybe the women he's used to dealing with in the big bad city.
when and then they reinforce it when he's like walking the dog because like the husband goes like, oh, she cooks as good as she looks at him.
Ugh,
Like from yeah, yeah, which is like the initial. I love that because it's just such a
barf,
like
barf.
we're going here. Again, it's designed to make you annoyed. This is what this film is supposed to be doing. God damn it!
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be stupid or silly. It's supposed to make you angry, and it does.
Um,
Good.
so there's something else that I noticed throughout the original movie, and that was that there seems to be a nature motif kind of woven
Mm.
in throughout it. We see like that scene you were just talking about when Carol the neighbor brings over a pot roast or casserole or whatever it is.
It's
And
probably yeah. I
then
don't
they
know.
kind of have this lingering shot of her just like walking into the woods,
Mm,
ostensibly
mm, mm.
cutting a path back to her house, I guess, but it's just framed as this kind of somewhat lingering shot of her just walking into this nice idyllic nature. And then Bobby first meets Joanna in this meadow that we see them walk through again later in the film. There are these kind of just we have the fact that like the tennis court is being kind of gotten rid of to be replaced with a yard like grass and stuff like it was before they paved it over. And I just like wanted to see if that was something you picked up on and what you think it means. I have an idea of what I think it means, but I was just I didn't find anything that maybe explicitly stated that that was the intention of the film, but it definitely seemed like they tried to make a deal about like the bucolic surroundings of the village and
You
framing
know,
the
I had
women within that specifically.
yeah, I hadn't really thought about it before, but when you say that, it speaks to an idea that it's like the destructive power of nature when wielded by men, if that makes sense. Like because obviously the city is positioned as this, you're leaving safety to go to this terrible place. Technically, when you know everything about the movie, and like the men
Yeah.
are destroying the tennis courts, and like they're building this suburban thing, but it's all like all these nice spaces, and they have a whole big discussion about what is it for dance and for like they're organizing like a big dance and a thing. So they're kind of like they're still trying to build this community, but it's all very it's like a corporate version of it because they're all sitting there and they don't listen to her idea. Well, they do that classic scene of like taking her. Well, no, to be fair, it's someone else's idea.
It's like the
They would
barn dance
disagree.
thing. Is that what you're?
Yeah,
Yeah. And she's like, I think,
yeah.
yeah. And they ignore
She's,
her. Like you see, they're not
yes, yes.
even, yeah.
But then they do say it's a good idea afterwards as well. So they kind of like take it. Yeah, it's not that she comes up with the idea, which would be again would be more on the nose, but they at least
Yeah.
ignore that she like is agreement. They're like, oh, who cares what you think? But that whole scene is horrible with the whole like she's just because I mean obviously it's not a gendered
I've
thing,
been
but
in
as
those
someone who
situations.
yes exactly yeah, so having to sit in a room full of boring people saying boring shit, it's just so. I
Well, I
mean,
think
I do think
specifically
it's
women, just because, like, obviously, there are still a lot of times where women will often just be the only woman around, and you
mm,
do just kind of find yourself shrinking within that atmosphere or feeling like a sore thumb or feeling like you're just invisible and not being included, or they think like just the fact that you're being let within the male circle is enough to count or whatever, and not
mm,
even like, and it's I've been in situations where I never like I didn't feel like it was done maliciously, maybe a little ignorantly, but um I would imagine a lot of women can relate to that, the feeling that she's probably was going through of just
mm,
like, hello, am I even here? Do you even give a shit? Am I just here to serve you drinks and stuff? Or,
yeah.
like,
And the only way like it seemingly to what do you call it, to bypass that is to adopt a very masculine presence yourself, and then as a woman you're then questioned for being masculine, so it kind of like undercuts you despite that
just
like
her
that's the only way I can fit in.
honesty. That's what
Well,
breaks
no,
up.
no, yeah, I'm not really talking about how Joanne is. I'm talking about more like
Oh,
in
okay.
a general social setting. The
Yeah.
only way that oftentimes you do see, like in business, obviously, is to going back to the 80s, but power suit and the how can we succeed in business? Well, let's be strong. Like we can't you you can't
Well,
ask a room full of men to
women are
adapt to their
demonized when they try
behavior.
to be like that anyways. So damn
Well,
if you do, damn if
that's my exact point.
you.
Yeah, it's that like the only way to have a voice heard is to adapt the same behavior, but then you, as you say, you're demonized when you do that. And the idea of asking men to, curtail their behavior to suit more of another like that kind of like a discussion that includes
More people
women.
that are not
It's,
them.
yeah, yes, exactly. It's seen as like not right and not fair, even though like there are different people with different communication. I mean, but going back to say like I've always felt like that in a room full of like guys. I don't really feel like I fit in that kind of thing, and I do find afterwards I'll talk to guys and they'll be like, oh, you have to do that to fit in. It's like, well, I'm not gonna change myself to fit in. Fuck you. But I think that's what a lot of men do. Even is that like there's
Yeah,
like two or
yeah.
three. blokey bloke or whatever you want to call them, who are leading it like that, and then there's other three guys. It's like
It's a lot of
six silly
posturing.
exactly, and they feel like they have to. Um, so it's not even like it's a universal thing. It's not like it's all men.
Yeah.
It's like it's a few men who make men act like that. Then they're all acting like that. So then it does become men. Then if a woman wants to get involved, she has to act like that. But then and
Well,
it's
they
just
need
this
to
kind of like,
fucking stand up for themselves and women more,
I
man.
know exactly. It's just
That's what's also
that's
frustrating about this is like not, I mean, again, we don't know. Maybe again, if there has been men that have spoken up, they've just been killed off too. We don't, obviously we don't know the
well, yes,
extensiveness
that's true.
of
That's
it,
a good point.
um, but like back to the nature thing, I love your interpretation of it because that's kind of the opposite of how I interpret it, whereas
Mm,
I thought them using the nature motif was kind of to play off of this idea of this way of life being like what's natural. Again, it's often a conservative kind of talking point of like
mm.
it's you know, it's between a man and a woman and you need this kind of perfect family and these are the values and the aesthetics of what a proper life relationship and family is supposed to look like. And by going to step further, kind of going back to the quote unquote natural order of things. And that's it's not like a viewpoint I think it's a viewpoint the film's condemning, but I think
Mm.
it's trying to use that um common refrain and mindset to just like world build a little bit and to also I think it kind of puts the stars in people's eyes when they move there, like Walters, you know, because I think it's kind of, especially with that when the neighbor is kind of walking into that the wooded area, whatever. I do think it's supposed to be framed as like it seeming nice to Walter or whatever. Like
Yeah,
I just saw it as them utilizing nature to connect it to this being what's from the men's perspective in that town, what the natural order of things are supposed to be. But
yeah,
again,
kind of like
it's open to interpretation.
no, I definitely agree. It's like it's because it is one of those like societal, um, seductive things. Are like the idea of like getting back to nature and like for the natural the unnatural nature of the city, where it shouldn't be this noisy and built up and rush and oh, you should take a time to relax, touch grass and all that stuff. And it's like, because I think when I was younger, I mean, maybe it's why we're linking it to a movie. It's why the movie appeals to me is because like when I was younger, I thought about like escaping to a log cabin and being on my own, and I think we've all had that thought. But then I
Mm.
realized when I got older being that remote means you have to rely on community. For people around you are necessary. You will die. So it kind of locks you in. It controls you almost more because then you are locked in. So that's great if a community are loving and caring and peaceful and whatever. If they're a bunch of psychopaths who are going to turn your wife into a robot, it's a bit shit. If you love
It
your wife, that
becomes
is.
very dependent on your social status in the community. And
Yes,
if you're
exactly.
outcasted, you're fucked, kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can get that.
And unless you want to be like a complete hermit who is just the crazy old bloke in the woods who hunts rabbits or whatever, which you can do, but you'll never be able to rejoin society. Basically,
Yeah.
you can either, and I mean, whereas the city, while it is so built up, you can almost house yourself away from people if that's what, like because I'm very antisocial. What I like to do is I like to I'm going to surround myself with infrastructure and hide myself within that infrastructure. You
Yeah.
know, whereas living out in the idyllic
Well, I think even
countryside.
Joanna was doing that to an extent because, like, again, the scene when she first meets Bobby, she's off on her own in that meadow, just like reading and just like chilling out on a nice day. And I
Hmm.
think you could also interpret it in a positive way of saying, like, it is telling that we only see both of them kind of in that field, and it's kind of a wild field, and they're kind of still wild women within this structure, quote unquote.
Yeah,
Um,
'cause it's
so
all coming together, man. As you're saying with stuff like for men wielding nature stuff as destructive, and then also if you take that, like the men aren't there. The men aren't enjoying the nature of the suburbs or whatever, the peacefulness. They're out doing their work still. And because I was just thinking about like the scene where she's taking the pictures of all the kids when the kids all stay with
oh,
them,
yeah, yeah.
and and then she takes that to like her photo guy or whatever, and it's like, oh, I
Oh,
like it,
love
and she's like,
that
what are you trying to
scene.
say and stuff, yeah. And it's like, but I almost take it as like if you would just chill out and let the women in your lives like enjoy the thing, they might grow to accept the suburban thing and find their place in it. But you're forcing them to be what you think they should be in the situation rather than just like letting it naturally happen. Like, because she might have learned, like, oh, actually, I can live here and with my photography career, and I can do it here in a different way. I was in the city and I was doing this, but actually, I'm starting to see the beauty of this world and like where I am. She could have naturally lived there as a point, and instead, it's like, no, robot. And
Well, yeah, that I think something else very telling happens in that scene when she's showing her photography to, I don't know, like a gallery curator or something. And like you said, he asks her like what she wants from doing the photography, what she's hoping to kind of achieve. And she's like, I just want someone one day to like be like, oh, that photo reminds me of an Ingalls. And she goes to clarify that
mm,
that's her maiden name. And I think it's really telling, a word that I've used 50 million times in this conversation, that she wants her work to be under her name, her maiden name, and not her married name. And I think that gives you a good snapshot as to where her head is at. Not even necessarily that she's like on the brink of divorce or something, but that she's someone that prizes, and it's important. Her individuality is important to her, and her work stand on its own to her. And it's something that comes up in real life and stuff where it's like a lot of people who achieve high things, like getting a doctorate, want them to be known by their maiden name because it's like I'm the one that made this happen, not my husband, so I'm gonna have
yeah,
it under my name. And obviously, there's whole discussions around taking your husband's name when you marry and stuff at all right now. Um, and people rebuking that or just changing the tradition of it. It's, neither here nor there. It's not a bad or good thing. It's your choice. But I was surprised that that was even like a point of inclusion in this film, maybe a little bit ahead
mm.
of its time, even. And again, it
Well, no,
just
yeah,
is a good drop of character building for her.
mm,
And this is another issue that someone brought up about the remake that I saw, where a big reason it doesn't work is because that the remake doesn't spend the time building up these characters. We get to
mm.
know Bobby and Joanna in the beginning for the people that they are, especially away from their husbands, through their friendship with each other. We understand what makes them. They have each of their own characteristics and viewpoints on the world. They give a sense of personhood that the remake doesn't give to a lot of the main female characters, and so it's like it's just very hollow, surface level. Like, who even are these people, and why should we care that this is happening to the kind of a thing? It's like I really
Yeah,
appreciate just the characterization that they gave to especially Bobby and Joanna in the original, because I grew to care about them a lot. I really loved their relationship with each other. And I think ultimately when Bobby is killed off and her robot version is brought, there's a reason that that scene is so impactful and why it's
mm,
like it's been voted as one of the most like chilling scenes of movie history, because you've taken the time to build up these two people and their relationship and them trying to fight against this. And it's very much kind of like the all hope is lost moment, I think, for Joanna and for the film at that point. And I even read that like Catherine Ross and Paula Prentice genuinely became very good friends themselves, and Catherine Ross couldn't film that scene stabbing her. The director had to shave his hand and
mm.
do a close up of his hand himself stabbing her because she found it too disturbing to basically kill her friend, or attempt to, you know. And I
Hmm.
think all of that really elevates the film. But again, it's such a difference in writing and
Yeah.
performance ultimately too.
Well, because yeah, because what I was going to say about the remake is like going on your line of like taking your husband's name or not. Like a very simple satirical thing would have been to have said Nicole Kidman never took Matthew Broderick's name. I can't
Yeah.
remember the characters' names. There. But yeah, that would have been such a simple thing to throw in there. Like, oh, he never took my name, but he didn't because he didn't care. And it's like that would be so like an obvious thing for the character they portrayed of Nicole Kidman being to have done, to have not taken his name in marriage. They
To
didn't even
just like
discuss it.
further emasculate him kind of a thing.
Exactly. It would have fit their themes. That's what's annoying about it. It would actually fit the themes they were doing,
Yeah.
but we didn't do
Maybe
it.
it was
They
just
didn't
too
care.
reliant on people already knowing the story. And like I can
Yeah.
understand that because like calling something like Stepford Wife has just inserted the kind of cultural lexicon at this point. Even if it's like people don't even know that it's from a book or from a novel. I mean, a movie from the 70s and stuff. It's just a phrase that gets used to signify a certain type of like look or behavior.
Well,
And I
yeah, it
can,
was the phrase before tradwife, wasn't it? Really,
well,
that
yeah,
was what
you know, I
tradwife
mean,
was. Yeah.
it comes up when talking about trad wives, where everyone's like, "This is all a bit Stepfordy, isn't it?" You know, like, and
I feel like tradwife is probably the attempt for people to take back that word, so it doesn't have a Stepford
or it's
association, I
just people being
imagine.
like, you know, they didn't have it so bad in that village. Um,
Spinero
we
robots, it's
we
fine.
don't have to
Um,
talk about the fact that they were just murdering women at a pretty significant clip there to get that result, but
Listen, you just do the whole alien Earth thing where it's like, oh no, we just transfer you over to a body and you're still you,
oh
but you've got
God.
like great fake boobs and like hollow eyes and whatever the hell else happens at
Well,
that end. We haven't talked
we
about the
can.
end scene yet, which is like the most famous
I
scene in
I
the
was
whole
gonna
goddamn
get to it,
movie.
but before I got to it,
Yeah.
just from a point of my own curiosity, since obviously you're not native to the US and you're
Mhm.
an Englishman,
A filthy limey.
I was curious, like, what's your relationship with kind of this suburban housewife archetype? Is it something that like you've encountered there or has roots in the UK at all? Because it's like it's a very Americanized story or quote, you know, icon if we want to call it that for all of its problems.
Hmm.
And obviously it's something that this movie really relies on and digs into to tell its story. So I was curious just from someone that's outside of this country where it's like so prevalent and is used a lot in our media, what your relationship with that's like.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, it's difficult because I don't. I never really had that traditional family dynamic, so I can't like so speak to it in a personal experience. But in terms of seeing it in society, yeah, it's not. It's not really a thing. Like, obviously, there are lots of stay-at-home mums here, but
Sure.
yeah, like I don't think it's. I mean, it's the same in terms of the living is the same. Like, if you are a stay-at-home mum, you have to like cook and clean and do all the shit like that, and it is hard to like. It's a full-time job. But I think, yeah, I think
I
I grew up with
suppose
that
I just
whole.
mean like is there any sense of like because like there's a lot of it's been very mythologized here like this kind of 1950s housewife aesthetic
Hmm.
and dynamic and I was curious if that was ever a thing there as well or is it something you picked up on just by consuming a lot of American media as well being like oh this is how this was for a time and all that or whatever.
I think it's probably like the American idea come over here because like I
Mm,
don't think it was ever idealized here.
okay.
I
Yeah.
think it's more like yeah, it's seen. If we're going to talk about however it's perceived in media, I'm probably forgetting something obviously, but how it's perceived in media, it's like the defense is listen, it's a full-time job in itself, which would imply that the negative perception of it is that like oh, it's just not working, you're just staying at home, and that's what it is in the UK. Whereas like in the US, it seems like there is like a aspirational idea about being the traditional housewife.
It's been very
I don't
romanticized.
because here it's like I think we just have that idea of like ladies with like okay, going back, but like Jane Austen kind of like it's all maids and shit. So it's not like and obviously that's not your average household, but like if we're talking
Well,
about like
that's
what
true.
we
You
see
guys
here,
just have a longer history to crib from
yeah. So there's
with
lots of
your
yeah that
own gender roles and also that being portrayed a lot in media too.
yeah. I think like when you look at something like I don't know Bridget Jones, that's like a very different thing. Like but yeah,
Yeah. You have your
there's
own
just always
versions of it, I suppose, but it's not explicitly like the homemaker in an apron coming out to
it's hard.
serve things, but
I'm really trying to think because there are sitcoms set here where you do have like the mother and stuff and whatnot, but
yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to really hard like search my knowledge for that kind of like I just say the traditional homemaker trope in England, and
Well, I
it
just feel like it
really
has to be a
yeah.
more universal experience, but I guess it just hasn't been propagandized as much or maybe romanticized as much as it gets here for better or for worse. And so I was just really, really curious what someone from another country even thinks of these kind of portrayals or, its prevalence in American media a lot of the time. Also, it just depends what you watch, but I just feel like it comes up
I guess
a lot.
I not to be that like whatever guy, but like I did grow up watching like female comedians like French and Saunders and whatnot. So
Yeah.
it's like Victoria Wood and all that type of stuff. I mean, like it's
Well, if
like so
anything, you probably
the
watched women making fun of these kind of
exactly that's what I was gonna say.
stereotypes and
Like
stuff. Yeah.
it's all kind of like
You came out of the gate realizing it's ridiculous.
yeah,
You know,
either
like,
it's like either it's people making fun of it, or it's women who have lived it who are making shows about how hard it is to do that as a
yeah.
thing. So there's not this, but certainly there's not the Superwoman idea for kind of like like I'm gonna like bake 1,000 muffins for my thing and do all the weird stuff they do in the remake.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is like a thing. I suppose that's they're showing that at least. But it's really weird that she decides it's so over the top remake because it's like that's what I was gonna say about the undercutting of the Bobby scene as well. Is like because they make her house being a mess at the first thing being a bad thing. They're like, oh, this is ridiculous, love. You've got to actually clean up. Whereas like in the original, it's like, no, that just shows she's human. It's like, oh, thank God your house is a bit messy. It makes me feel better,
Well,
and
like
also,
well, like I pointed out to you in the remake, they make her out to be like a hoarder. Like you see her house and it's
yes,
just like
yeah,
stacks of stuff everywhere. Whereas in the remake, it's just like it's a lived-in house. Like this is just what a natural house looks like when you live in it day in and day out, and you have your kind of certain method and your own madness sort of thing going on. Um, and it's
that's
just
it.
yeah, it's doesn't work in the remake because it's such an over exaggeration of that. Or in the original, it's like, no, this just looks like a regular house, and they're comparing
Yeah,
it. The exaggeration is the pristine house, is not her house, you know? Like,
just one of those things where it's just so, yeah. There's a realism to the original that makes it satire, that makes it like a worrying, like here, this is something that's happening. We've got to keep an eye on it. Whereas like when you make it into farce, but yeah, the line between satire and farce, god damn it, where like or spoof, like the remake is full on spoof, where it's just kind of like sending up the original. Whereas yeah, the original is like a horror satire, and like there is a line between the two. The humor in the original is always dark. Again, it's always dark and it's always creeping and it always makes you laugh, but it could make you cry if you thought about it too much. Whereas the remake is just like, oh look, isn't she messy? Isn't she Jewish? Isn't she like trying to be? Even Nicole Kidman, like yeah, is trying to be the perfect housewife for whatever reason she decides to do that. I mean, she's baking like literally 1,000 muffins out in the kitchen. Like, just what point are you making at this point? Because you're just being silly. You're making
well,
it
that
ludicrous. You're making
it
it
also undermines the point because it's like she's already doing what you would be making her to do.
well, that's the one thing where they do make Matthew Broderick slash the men into villains because before that you saw them together hanging out and whatnot. But yes, it's like because it tells the audience, look, she's already doing what he would want her to do, and he's still not enough for him.
Yeah.
His insecurity comes from just the idea of her existing anyway, and it's like, well, that's at least you're making them into villains at that point. But that's like the only time they do anything like slightly story worthy. Everything else is just rubbish. But a little tiny bit there, and then we undercut that by having him, not go through with it and betray her. Like, and we don't even really go into how the robot thing happens because why is she looking at a robot version of herself when they're not gonna make her into a robot? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It's again, it's just it's very sloppy storytelling and filmmaking, unfortunately. And like I know that's rich coming from two people who like, are not don't do that professionally and stuff,
No.
but it's like uh, you know when you see it sometimes. And sometimes it's just so overt. And I would
But
like to
why
think
is
I've
there
at
a
least
problem?
clocked in my 10,000 hours watching movies enough to like spot some bad decision making there. I'd like to segue into talking about the ending of the original. Like you were, I guess I'll just start off by saying like, did you like the ending? Did you find it effective?
Yeah, I really enjoy the ending just in general. I think as a kid when I watched it, like it was the first like truly dark ending I got to see, where it's
Mm,
like you just expect her to get away, but
mm-hmm.
and I think it's the way that also she just kind of gives up. She just sees herself as like this robot and just kind of gives up, man. And like, I mean, you could say, "Oh, that's a flaw," but it's not. It's a very human thing to do. Like, what do you when faced with this thing where like you've been betrayed by the man you love, and like you're in this like desperate situation, and this weird otherworldly version of yourself is looking back at you with dead black eyes, and it's coming
Well,
towards
not
you.
to mention the way that they use her children against her, which is incredibly fucked
Yes, yeah, yeah.
they, the
She was
only
nearly
reason
out, damn
she
it.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I hate that she even told him that she was gonna just fucking leave. Like, rule number one of leaving an abusive situation. Not that I'm here to tell
Mm,
people, but like even the therapist she sees, she's like, don't tell him, just get your kids and go.
yeah.
And she was doing that, and then she ran, and then Walter was just becoming more and more aggressive. And then, I mean, I get it. It was probably just a heat of the moment thing where she blurted out, and she's like, "We're fucking leaving you, bro. Like that, this is done. Where I'm at the end of my rope. So don't even try to like make amends or make me whatever." Because like at the end, he's completely drunk out of his mind because like he knows that this is well. I was gonna say the night that it's happening, but they even said they weren't ready for her quite yet, and we can see that because her robot eyes are
Mm,
black. But yeah, it's really shitty that they use a recording of her children to lure her to the men's association to ultimately kill her. And that's obviously the only reason she was there anymore. And I originally was a little frustrated that she didn't like fight back, but like she has been trying to fight back in some ways throughout the whole movie. And like I say, when she realizes it's happened to Bobby too, I framed that as being like the all hope is lost thing. I think she just realized
mm.
this kind of just the amount of monstrosity that she was against, the amount of because I imagine before then she was like the one person wouldn't let this happen to is Bobby, and it's happened to Bobby, and it's just like that was kind of her last tether to like sanity in a way, or again to hope of getting out of this. Suddenly she feels probably very much on her own and abandoned, and
I think because that's what you could see with mystery as, I suppose. Like, one way of a remake again is awful in terms of like before that you don't know it's robots. If they're doing weird stuff and they're like
yeah,
sketching
yeah,
her and
yeah.
they're like looking at, but you could call it. It could be mind control. It could be doppelganger. Whatever. It could be lots of different things. And like I don't
Like,
know. Whereas
yeah,
in yeah,
I don't think she was prepared for it to be what it is. Of it, like, why would anyone think that that's,
yeah, exactly. Why would you
you
think they
know,
could do like a
it
full life
goes,
reboot? Yeah.
it goes full tilt sci-fi in that moment,
Mm,
basically. She
yeah.
walks into this facsimile of her bedroom, and like that's when everything kind of starts coming to view for the viewer and for her of her realizing just how orchestrated everything has been since she's been there. Them sketching her, them scoping out her house, them trying to get her voice. Um,
Mm.
and then you turn around and she sees that this fake, fully realized for the most part version of herself, but with bigger boobs, of course, which they make a point of. Um,
Like I got reminded of the idea that um even when because you said about the voice being recorded,
mm,
um, the fact that only happens because like she like blackmails the guy into like making her women's association happen because they go about they try and make a women's association. It doesn't work. Or the robot's like no. Then the voice guy's like, "Oh, give me your voice," and she's like, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll do it if you convince all these women to do for me." So the point is, even then, she's not getting her way. She's like finding on her own. She has to like game the system and like blackmail this guy and like the sense of control they have and the willingness for it. I suppose what I'm trying to say is like sometimes you feel like you're making ground, but what you're really doing is playing into a like a bigger thing because what you're giving up is more because she didn't realize that the voice thing she was giving up was actually a very key thing. If she hadn't done that, then they couldn't have made the proper robot and like so
I
it's kind of like
hated it because
yeah,
again, you knew that that was in service of that when you were seeing that, and I'm
exactly,
like,
yeah.
why are you doing this? Why are you indulging? Because she questions him on it, and he's just like, oh, it's just a hobby, and I'd be like, I think it's weird that you're trying to like collect women's voices. Not that he probably said, oh, it's just only the women or whatever, but I'm just like maybe I'm just more naturally paranoid than Joanna is because I'd be like, no, this is fucking weird. I want to know what you're using this for? This is intimate stuff. Like just recording
Hmm.
my voice to what? Like I don't know.
And obviously that like very much translates to today with all the AI stuff and recording and it's great how like and we haven't talked about this much because we have been focusing so much on the gender and on the remake, but there are so many things in this movie that can then relate to today, like the loss of autonomy and the loss of your identity
Yeah.
and the replacement of especially women on social
Hmm.
media in AI because women are asked to give so much of their physical appearance and their body and stuff to like the algorithm or whatever. And
Yeah.
at one point, it wouldn't be that surprising if you did turn around, and if you are one of a woman who has like given all of that, and you turn around and like, oh, there's an AI copy of me. I mean, the amount of women you see who have to deal with
It's
like
already
bots
happened.
versions of her, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They already, you know, so it's already happening right now. It's literally happening as we speak. So it's a very it's sad.
Yeah.
It adds to the sadness of the film because the film is warning people about this thing that's coming, and it's like it's here, like in real
Yep.
society. And same with the remake in its own way with the whole conservatism and the trad wife stuff. It's like this is coming,
Yeah.
by the way. Oh wait, it's here, and I mean that's why I love horror satire, but it's also the depressing part of horror satire because then you look back and go like,
Oh
oh yeah,
shit.
they were kind of
Yeah.
warning us about this like decades ago, and we just kind of didn't really. I mean, obviously I know it's just a film, so how seriously can you take it, but you know it would have been good if people had paid more attention to stuff like this. And but what can you do?
Well, I think it's very the ending is even sadder to me in that they have the fake Joanna kill the real Joanna. Because I'm like,
Mm,
these fucking cowards can't even do it themselves. They make the fucking robot of her do it. And it's just like that. It's a terrifying scenario to think of. And especially with the style choice of her. So she has just black eyes because they haven't,
mm,
finished rendering her eyes or whatever for this model. And so you just see this very soulless version of yourself coming at you to strangle you. And it's just like, I
yeah,
don't,
in a sheer naivety with a big smile on her face as well. Yeah,
in that instance, I don't blame her for just being inert because, like, how does your brain even process what the fuck's happening? Like, she's found, like, in the span of like 5 minutes, she realized, like, the recording of her children was fake. She realized the banality of evil with this guy just being like, oh, just because we have the power to, fuck you.
yeah,
And then finding this fucking fake set of her bedroom that her husband's okay with it or has been working towards this the whole time behind her back. And then now she's just looking at this idealized version of herself, and then she's being freaking murdered. And it's like,
yeah. And the evil guy's holding a dog. Dog seems
yeah,
happy
that's
about it. Fucking dog betrays her.
and it's like I think it's just really a really chilling aspect of the end that like this whole time it's been the men orchestrating this, and then not that I'm like in favor of men doing this to women or but it's just like they don't even at the end have a hand in explicitly doing it. They make their own kind of Frankenstein-esque creations do
Yeah,
their dirty work for them, and it's just like again another very frustrating aspect of it, another very depressing aspect of it, and at the end they're making women enact violence upon themselves through no fault
mm,
of themselves. And even though, like, of course, that robot wouldn't exist or whatever she is without the men, but it's just like there's just that's just a particular detail that really gets under my skin, where it's
mm.
like we're making it do you do it to yourself in a way in the end, and we're not gonna even be there necessarily. I mean, who knows? Maybe they were watching from the shadows or something, but yeah, just fucking shows you their cowardice and their measliness and it's just like or
Yeah,
even their indifference in a sense because maybe none of them are there except the head guy and it's like this has become so normalized and whatever to them. I mean again in like they say that they weren't expecting it to happen to her that night, but it's like maybe they're even apathetic in their own way towards because again they've normalized it and they've been so successful with it to this point they don't even worry that she's
yeah,
going to be able to fight back in the end, and they and unfortunately are proven right. And I give a lot of, like you said, kudos to the film for going there and for being willing to have it be a bleak ending because giving a happy ending does undermine the message ultimately, and it wouldn't have the staying power that it does, I think, ultimately, if it didn't kind of stick to its guns and just fucking kill her off and have her lose, in many, many ways.
yeah. I mean, again, we can see that in the remake where because the end's so triumphant, it just like it's like, well, that was dealt with very easily. Let's go about our business.
Yeah.
I don't know what they want from that.
It didn't have the guts to do it or maybe it thought it was being progressive with it where it's like the sad ending's been done. Surely we're beyond that a little bit now, right? Like girl power. She's gonna girl boss her way out of this
Yes,
situation because it was
which
the
is
era of girl boss. And like
the yeah,
yeah, it
the
it
entire like problem with that little time period is that like yeah, it was like lip service to the idea of female empowerment, not actual female
Yes.
empowerment. And it's I mean, not that there aren't troubles now, obviously, but I think there's
No,
a
but I don't think
slight
there was any real attempt at understanding it. It was all very performative, I think, and just
yeah.
like you say, lip service, saying the right things, but not actually understanding any of the history or the context behind those things. There's still a
I think the
veil of
re
ignorance.
yeah, it's all just kind of like I say, like because I think it's because men at the time didn't think that anything would actually come of it, and whereas now because there have been actual steps taken. That's why we're seeing in society today the backlash to that, where like there are like let's abolish Roe v. Wade, and like, you know what I mean? It's like because
Yeah.
something actually happened. That's why the backlash is existing now. Is because these men didn't take it seriously. They're like, isn't this funny? La 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 la. Then stuff actually happened, and then labs like, no, let's do horrible things now to try and actually, which goes back to the original film. Was like it's a satirical look at what men might do if women do have power. Like, oh, we're just replacing robots, and it's like I don't know. There was a message here that like but I don't know what you do. Again, like with Joanne, I don't know what you do with that message. If it's like, hey, by the way, half of the world is gonna like not let you have your own voice if you
Yeah.
try. What do you do with that? What do you? So that's why I can see why the film got backlash and why some people might not like how bleak it is because like it's not. Yeah, there isn't really a hopeful message. It's more just like I don't know, look out for yourself. I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know what positive message you take away from Stepford Wives. I suppose just we're not robots yet. Yay! But
Well, I think like you say, it was a warning or a wake up call to men potentially if they saw this,
yes, ideally, yeah.
but
As a message to men, like,
also
do you not want to be like this? Like,
but also I don't know, maybe they didn't even necessarily think they would achieve something off the back of it, but more just fucking depicting it because like I said beforehand, not many things, if any major film at least, had really even attempted to tell that kind of story. So just committing it to film and and treating it with the seriousness and the understanding that it's fucked up,
yeah, I think that
grounding it in that way and saying like there are elements of this that do happen and are real. Of course, it's taken to a kind of fantastical extent. Um, but everything aside from the like actual robot like procedure and stuff is based off of fucking reality. And so
yeah,
I think it's just again, I think and it's something that it's a very pretentious thing that gets brought up, but like it is film just holding up a mirror to our own society and being like, this is a part of who we are and what happens. Are you okay with it? Or are you even aware of it? And also just validating women's experience as well. So it's like
mm,
maybe they weren't thinking that they were going to contribute to any great feminist movement, but again, it was of a time and it was in dialogue with that time and saying, yeah, like we have conviction and belief that women's rights are important and women's stories are worth telling and they want to be they wanted to be a part of that because I doubt that they thought adapting this book into a movie was going to be commercial success. I mean, obviously they probably hoped for it. A studio would have to greenlight it for that, but like it's and it was a different time in filmmaking where quite frankly more risks at least at studio level were taken like that, but
well, I
it
mean,
is
the
just
thing
a
is, you'd
story
already
that
had
they
like
believed in, you know.
well, yeah, and you've got Priors with Rosemary's Baby having come out in 1968, and like so
Yep.
that was already successful, and also
Yep.
then The Exorcist coming out in '73, which
Yeah.
obviously was a flipping massive hit. So it's like for these horror books, let's get them and let's
Like I'm
so
saying, it
like
does it that's a very good point in that like maybe they could have seen commercial success with the things that have come before it within the genre, and not even like I mean, I
also
guess
Westworld
the
was
women
'73 as
point.
well. So
Yeah, so I'm just saying, like, even if you were to remove maybe the female element, although Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby very much have that female element, but like, it was just kind of maybe again the conspiracy kind of shady corporation stuff um was just a thing of the time too. So maybe they thought it was genre friendly enough that that's why this got greenlit. But um just kind of like the final point that I wanted to make about the original ending is it's just a filmmaking choice that I really liked that the final shot is her just is Joanna coming up really close to camera after she's been roboticized and she's all perfect housewifey and everything. she just comes up real close to camera, and before it comes into focus, it's blurry, and her eyes go kind of black again, just within the blur of the camera readjusting for her being that close. And I thought it mimicked the kind of robot that we saw just a couple minutes, that had the just the black eyes. It seemed like it was
Yeah,
an intentional filmic choice to kind of mimic that or harken back to that, to just make one final point that they wanted to hammer home about. This is not her. She isn't a person anymore.
exactly. Yeah,
Joanna's
behind the eyes,
gone,
she's soulless. Yeah.
and it's fucking sad. And just to
Hmm.
really, really nail that kind of down, I just thought was a neat kind of artistic. Yeah, like kudos to Brian Forbes and whoever the cinematographer was on that kind of choice, because it's a bit of a chilling shot, and I just think it was effective.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, like in your research, like there's a reason this film is named like different scene, like the end scene and for Phasmophobia are named as like some of like most terrifying or memorable scenes in horror. Because there's one, they say cinematography is like is there, but they're very intentional in everything they do, and two, like it really does get under your skin. This idea of like losing autonomy and losing who you are, like it's got some great satirical themes. I just, even well, yeah, because it's like it's all gendered, but it is kind of like even if you're a guy watching it, you can sympathize with the idea of it and how horrible it would
Yeah.
be to be in a situation. And then when you maybe talk to like someone they do say, "Well, yeah, that's how I feel sometimes." You're like, what?
Oh
Like,
shit.
oh no,
Yeah, like
yeah,
yeah, I think it's a very universal thing to at the end there with the reveal of being confronted with a completely like simulated version of yourself. Like your brain would just fucking go nuts. Like I think anybody can understand why that would be terrifying. And again, if maybe the film was trying to achieve anything, that is a very effective and moving way to instill that into people who don't maybe have that lived experience of being like, well, yeah, this is Ken how it feels how it to be a woman, or maybe any other sort of kind of oppressed or marginalized group of people of like you want us to be a certain way and be this perfect mold of what you think we should be, and that also happens to be the best way to service you and keep you in power and all this stuff. And it's yeah, having autonomy stripped from you is terrible. And so if any men or people, other people that are not women watch this and can kind of come away with that understanding that while this might not literally be happening, like with robots, it is happening in other ways and it's how it feels, then I think it's achieved something. But yeah, I just really think they did a great job. And I think it was very smart to end the film where it ends, because obviously the
Hmm.
remake doesn't. And I think it is a very like cruel ending of just being like, and this is what you get by. Like this is what it is. Like we're not gonna make you feel good about it. We're not gonna give you a little extra scene to make you feel better about it or something. Joanna's gone. They're all gone, and it's seemingly gonna just keep happening. And it's fucking rough. But I think sometimes storytelling has to be. Do you have any final kind of thoughts or points that you'd like to make that you didn't get to because I talked over you?
no, no. I was taking the end point because it's true. Like as I was thinking about the position of the same idea as being if you were to be like a guy, I mean, because the thing we couldn't watch. Unfortunately, part of the reason I brought this up was because there's a film called The Stepford Husbands, but we couldn't find it for love nor money because it's not
Yeah.
available online anywhere, and there's no versions of it anywhere. And you think it was a TV movie from like the '90s, and I think part of that is because I do remember because I watched it as a kid, and that's why I could remember it. Because I was like, oh, this is interesting. But I think it is just a rehash of the original, but done through
Mm.
men. But I
Hmm.
feel like there is a difference when you coat it into a male form because when we're told how to be, like be like get jacked or whatever, like there's a level of strength there. Like we gain, like if you do it, if you follow it, if you're a blind like gym rat, whatever. Apart from being if you're a manosphere guy, you're being a bit of a. It's weird, but at least you get stronger is the point.
Hmm.
Even then there's a positive to it. You can actually maybe force your way more and whatnot. Whereas if you follow this, the female prescriptive thing, what are you doing? You're just serving others. If you're this perfect housewife, like, and like that's the only reason people love you is because you're giving them stuff. Like it's not autonomy, you know. So the point is, if you're that gym guy, at least you're like, I'm big, strong man. Like it doesn't hit hard. I mean, obviously you're a robot, but like if you go on the other side, because in the Stepford Husbands, it's again it's for drugs. It's like being controlled. You don't actually be replaced fully. You're just you're like following that kind of like idea of what it is to be an ideal man. Which in the Stepford Husbands, it's to be quiet and to be strong and to just do like fix things around the house. That's their thing. That's like
Yeah.
that's yeah. But as I say, there's like a not there's I don't know. It just feels like you while I can understand the plight, I can never live it because the expectations on me are different. Like I'm not. I suppose I'm expected to serve in terms of like, yeah, if I was like the ideal man, I'd be good at house. I'd be good, sorry, like fixing things, and that's kind of service. But it's more of a skill, and you normally can earn money from that, and blah blah blah. I just think there's more. Even if I was doing my like utmost to be the conservative idea of like the your typical male, it would allow me more opportunities. It wouldn't hold me back. It wouldn't make me like a trapped housewife in suburbia. I would be like able to do more things, earn more money, and blah blah blah, blah be more successful and blah. Because our society is based upon money and ambition and so on. If I was, we prize these ideas like if men want women to be homemakers, they should probably make it more of an incentive, like the world actually runs around that. Not, hey, by the way, you're going to be like secondary citizens all the time. If you want to do your idea, you hit the ideal of what I think you should be. You'll be a secondary citizen. Hooray! It's like, why would anyone want that? Why would anyone want that?
I would not be surprised if Stepford Wives keeps being remade or adapted. Another film that I also thought of while watching this, and that I know for a fact was directly influenced, is Get Out. Jordan Peele has
Mm.
said both Rosemary's Baby and Stepford Wives were huge influences on him while he was making that. And like I thought of it independently, and I mean not like I'm not like tooting my own horn or something, but I made a note of going like this is kind of like Get Out, and then I was doing research and saw a clip of Jordan Peele like directly like naming those films. Because I thought of it in the scene where then one of the neighbors we first see her glitching at that party, and like it's depicted as her just repeating the same phrase over and over again, and we start seeing that's just like something's weird, something's off, and it reminded me of the scene in Get Out where it gets the film gets its name, where like Keith Stanfield's character comes to and is saying get out of here, like his nose is bleeding, and that also happens at a garden party and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, this reminds me of that scene. And I'm like, actually, there's a lot of this that kind of reminds me of that. And then, so it's no coincidence, I guess, in the end. It's just they took that formula and obviously made it about racism and not. I mean, there's sexism woven into that as well because you have black women's identity being taken too. But I think it just goes to show you that the DNA of this film has stuck with people, is still influencing people and kind of making a difference, and is kind of a has been acknowledged as being a really kind of smart and effective way to convey this kind of um, the experiences of people who are again oppressed, ostracized, and yet want to be used, you know, for whatever
Yeah, they don't,
purposes.
but they
The
don't want to
people in
get rid
power.
of you. They want to like change you to be what they want you to be. Yeah.
I appreciate that kind of tactic of being like, oh, did this make you feel uncomfortable? And have to examine why. And it's like, oh, is it because it actually might happen in our real life and that's fucked up? Like, and I think hopefully, again, maybe Stepford Wives ending does that too, even though of course it's a darker ending. Like we were saying, if people get to that scene where she's confronted with herself, her fake self, and are having that, or even just even any of the kind of dread that's instilled before that of like even up to the line about the guy liking women doing domestic chores, like at least most women would probably be like, oh, there's something fucking wrong here, like no. Like all those kind of microaggressions or real world fears get woven into these stories to let the audience kind of do the work of creating the horror around it. It forces you
We
to kind of be complicit, not complicit necessarily in a sense, but it does force you to have to contend with how things might really be.
Yeah. I mean, I think like in all this discussion, there's two things that have trigger my thoughts now as we like close up. And one is that like there's almost a kind of like other message of like creative versus business as well, because
Hmm.
obviously like the diminishing of like these little chores and like the hobby of photography and all that type of stuff, like all this stuff is like, but it's not money making, but is it? It's not like grounded in business and blah blah, blah. So there's kind of like like a satirical element there. And then two, what the fuck is with grocery stores and bad endings? You got grocery store, Stepford Wives, grocery store, In the Mist, grocery store, In the Intruder, all three. Bad endings where the good guys lose. What's going on there? Some kind of weird grocery store conspiracy.
Gosh, I don't know. There's so much in this story, and how it keeps kind of, it seems like it keeps kind of being relevant, that I probably could talk about it forever. But um I don't know. I think it's a good place to wrap up there.
Hmm.
And I appreciate your thoughts on it as usual.
Well, I think with this
You're a
one,
no skip guest.
it's the first time we've talked about a movie that I think most people know or have seen, so I don't have to say like go see it now. But I suppose, yeah, again, if you haven't somehow seen it, I would definitely watch the original Stepford Wives. You can probably skip the remake unless you kind of
Yeah.
want to be annoyed. But maybe you do. Like, the OG annoys you in one way to be proactive, and the second for remake annoys you in a completely different way. So it just makes
Yes,
you
if you're
want to
into the
hate the
compare and
world.
contrast of that and be a nerd about it like I am, check it out. But really, probably read the book, see the OG.
Mm.
There's lots of good things written about it and analyzed about it at this point, and I kind of consider it an essential kind of viewing or text for this day and age. And it was really kind of gratifying to get to talk about it. It's a film that I think this is the second time I've seen it, and I just kind of keep liking it more and more.
Mm.
And I'm just glad that it's kind of garnered a cult following in the end.
Well, it's lovely to talk with you about it, and yeah, again, just
Same
discuss these
here.
interesting ideas.
Of course. And I'll see you back here again, I'm sure. Woo! We escaped Stepford Village, y'all. Especially doing it twice. What are we, masochists? That conversation was, I think, kind of strangely cathartic, though, as looking back, weirdly, helps to make sense of the now. As usual, please check the episode notes for links to James's work and to visit the podcast's official site. As long as engagement is king, liking, following, and sharing will always be what will help Ginger Pop the best. I appreciate anyone who's been on the journey with the podcast thus far, really, deeply, truly, madly, even, as Savage Garden suggests. And I can't wait to bring you some more. So until then, watch out for some old dude trying to sketch you, and even more important, Nicole Kidman's remake wig. I appreciate you listening to the end. See you next time.